Hi guys, so thanks for tuning in to our second cook along. This is for a bruschetta recipe. So basically, bruschetta is a little bit like a tomato on toast sort of dish. So what we're going to do is we collect all your ingredients. So to start with, obviously we need some tomatoes. Again, remember portion size that we spoke about last week. A portion is about a handful. So for me, I'm going to be using two medium-sized tomatoes. I've got a clove of garlic. That's all we need because it's obviously quite strong. One spring onion. If you haven't got a spring onion, you can use maybe a quarter of a normal onion. We've got some bread or a roll or toast. So we've lightly browned this roll. So we're going to use that today. And also we're going to have some basil. If you haven't got basil, you could use parsley, coriander. We don't have to use it at all. Even if you've got dried herbs, you can also use them. So before we start, okay, if you've got any comments, if you put them into the comment section, there'll be myself or Hayden, we can get back to you. And we'll make a start. So just before we actually start, we need to do a couple of things. So we want our hair tied back. If you've got an apron, good to put an apron on so you don't get all messy. Take any jewellery off, if that's watches or rings. If you're in the kitchen, make sure you've got a pair of shoes on that are tied up with laces so we're not slipping around or sort of don't slip over. And if you've got long sleeves, if you can roll them up, okay? So this dish, it typically comes from sort of Italy, sort of Mediterranean sort of countries. I've had it a lot when I go to a place called Malta. And basically, sometimes we have it as a starter. So it's quite nice, maybe like an afternoon sort of starter or like a meal like that. So we need our tomatoes, okay? So this time we're going to use medium tomatoes. If you've got a big tomato, you might only need half. If you've got little cherry tomatoes, you might need maybe 5 or 6. So what we're going to do, I'm going to bring the screen down and then I'm going to go through some of the steps. Before we actually do that, just go through some equipment. We didn't go through equipment. We need a bowl, a spoon. We need a sharp knife. Okay, this time we're using a paring knife, which is a small one for vegetables. We've got our plate, which is obviously going to be for our presentation of the dish, and we need a chopping board. Like that. So underneath our chopping board, we've actually got a bit of wet kitchen roll, and we just use that so the chopping board doesn't slip when we're chopping, just as a safety point. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the tomatoes, okay? So I'm going to bring the screen down and we're going to go from there. So with our tomatoes, they've all been washed. So we're really going to do one chop with this, okay? And that is a bridge chop or a slice. So the way we're going to do that is by using our thumb and our index finger, and we're just going to put them either side of the tomato, and our knife is going to come under that gap, so through that bridge, okay? And we're going to use a saw motion just to go back and forth till we go right down to the bottom. And we're going to keep repeating that until the tomatoes get smaller and smaller. Again, if you've got a bigger tomato, you probably have to do a few more chops than if you would have a small tomato. So we're going to start off. So we're going to have thumb and index finger either side, and we're going to come under the bridge. I'm going to show you this way. And we're just going to use a sawing motion going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until we've got two halves. Okay, like so. Now, once we've got here, it's going to be quite hard for us to maybe balance the tomato. So what might be better is to put it on the flat side so it doesn't move. And we're going to keep repeating that until we want sort of it diced. And dice is maybe 5 millimeters, just maybe under a centimetre. And we're going to keep repeating this process. I'll show you from this side now so you can see from the back. until we're going to have them in sort of small cubes. So again, I'll move this to the side, and I'm just going to let you guys go on with the process. So we've got 1, 2. You might only have to do 1 or 2 saws back and forth if you've got a really sharp knife. 3. Now these might be a little bit big for us, okay? So we're just going to repeat the process again. So bridge, and then we've got them in half again. We're just going to keep repeating it until we've got sizes of tomato that are like that. Maybe just under 1 centimetre. So again, some of you, if you've got smaller tomatoes, it won't take as much time as this. If you've got bigger ones, it'll take a little bit more time. Just make sure we're getting the other 3 fingers out of the way. Because if we have them here, we could potentially come through and hit our back fingers. We want to try and get them out of the way, just so we're being safe all the time. Because it can easily slip. So I'm just going to show you 1 tomato because it's pretty easy to get the technique. I think doing a claw method, and a claw method is like this, might be a bit hard because sometimes they can slip. Okay, so once we've done our tomato, we can move on to the next vegetable. But before we do that, we're going to get all of our tomato, and we've got our bowl and our spoon. We're just going to put all of that into our bowl. Okay. And all those seeds, you can try and put them in if you wanted to. Doesn't matter, you can just leave them to one side. Okay, like so. So the next thing we're going to do is the garlic. Okay, so with the garlic, we've obviously got a skin that we don't particularly want. Now, if the older we are and the more comfortable you are with the knife, you might want to be a bit more adventurous with chopping. So because we're going to start off really easy today, we're going to do it nice and slow. So what we're going to do to start with is using the palm of a hand, put it on the garlic and just push down until you hear it snap. So now we've broke the garlic and it's really easy for the skin to come off. It comes off pretty much in one. Now, as I said, you can go quite hard with this, you can be quite easy, it's up to you. Ideally, we want to try and chop it up a little bit like the tomato using the bridge method. If you wanted to use the claw, you could use the claw, okay? If you've got a really big knife, okay, you might want to put your fingers on here, on the top of the knife, and go down. This is called the cross chop, okay? So we can do that. Now that's if you're just sort of really, really, really small. We still want a little bit of texture. So we're going to basically do the claw, something a little bit different. I'm going to show you with the spring onion anyway. So fingers, thumb at the back, fingers curved over, knife nice and firm, and we're just going to, while keeping the knife on the chopping board all the time, start off and come through the whole garlic. And we're trying to keep your thumb at the back, and we don't want to show any of our fingers, because obviously we could get them with our knife. If they fall apart a little bit, doesn't matter, we can just separate it. And we're all trying to do it so it's slow. And then we should have like loads of strands. If you wanted to do the cross chop then, you could do the cross chop then. We're going to basically use the claw again, and we're going to line them all up, and we're going to go across this way. So we should have our garlic really finely chopped up. Now what you can do after here, if you wanted it like a paste or like a puree, sometimes you can get them in jars. You can add a little bit of salt to there. Have the knife facing away from you. Salt goes on, and you can just push down on the garlic like so. And that way, you're just going to break all of those small bits of garlic down. And the more you do it, the more paste-like it will go. So again, as I said, we don't want to do this if we're young or small, or we haven't used a knife that many times. This is more for sort of older children or for adults. And then we're just going to go again. And what the salt will do, the salt will actually help break it all up, because it's obviously going to be quite hard. So that will sort of create a bit of a nice grind to it. And there is our garlic clove. What we want to do with that, we want to add that to the bowl. So we can put it on our knife, nice and gently, and put it into our bowl. Just make sure, obviously, you wash your hands after you've used garlic, because it's quite a strong smelling vegetable. Next, we've got our spring onion. Now, the spring onion, we've got the roots at one end, and we've got the sort of really dark green bits at the other end. Now, we can use the whole thing, not this. So we want to try and use a claw. So thumb goes on the vegetable, and fingers come tucked under. And we're going to just take the top off. We don't want that no more. You can keep these on if you wanted to, but if you wanted to sort of chop them off somewhere, all of this sort of stuff, that can go into sort of stews, soups, like casseroles, anything like that. That's fine to use, so you can use that. So what we're going to do with our spring onion is we're going to use the bridge. And we're going to sort of use a method that I sort of call the caterpillar, okay? So the index finger and the thumb is going to go either side. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the middle of our spring onion, and we're going to go along the whole spring onion until we've got two halves, okay? And then we can repeat the process. Thumb and index finger either side. Let me show you from this direction. And just look at the way my wrist, it goes down, move it along, down, move it along. And that's why it's called the caterpillar. Okay. Now if you've got a big knife, it'd probably be a little bit easier, because the big knives will have more of a bend here. So once you've got that, now probably one whole spring onion is probably going to be a bit much. So we might only want to use half of this. Remember, if you make more than you need, you can always put it in the bowl, put it in the fridge. Maybe you've got another bit of bread left over. You can have it for tomorrow, for the next day. Okay, so it doesn't have to be used fresh. And what we're going to do is use the claw. I'm going to chop it in half. And we're going to put one of them to the side, and we're actually going to just use one of the other ones. So we are going to thumb at the back, and we're going to use our claw. And we're going to chop them up a little bit like the garlic, nice and finely, trying to keep the knife on the chopping board all the time. So we're not coming off during slicing. We're only going off to go back. And obviously the more confident you get, the quicker that you'll be able to go. But always making sure that your fingers bend over like that. so you're not showing any skin from your fingertips. Now, if you've got a normal onion, again, you don't have to use spring onions. If you've got a normal onion, you would just dice it up as normal. So you do like the thin strips, and then you would just go across. Okay, so now we've got all of our diced spring onion. And that, again, is going to go into our bowl. Let's bring our bowl over to start with. That's going to go into our bowl. Make sure you put everything in. So now we've got our bread. Okay, so the bread, we've toasted it. As you can see, it's got a nice brown colour. If you just wanted to use like a normal slice that's come out of the cupboard, or you've defrosted maybe a roll or such, you can use that. So we've done this just because it gives it a bit of crispiness to it. So before we actually do that, we've got our mixture. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to give it a bit of a mix together. And I'm going to very, very quickly do our other tomato. Okay, so you don't have to, if you've already done yours, that's great. So I'm going to very quickly chop this up. So I'm going to use a different technique. I'm going to use claw with this now. Now, if you're obviously using the tomatoes, the skin side can be quite hard. So what we want to try and do is make sure we don't push down to start with, otherwise the juice is all going to splurt out. Just take your time. Make sure you've got a little slice into the mushroom, into the tomato before you go any further. Okay. So obviously this is a lot quicker than doing the bridges. There's one. Here's that second one. So again, we're going to add all that. And now you can see that it's got a nice red colour in there. We've got a little bit of green, a little bit of white coming through from the garlic. So now we're just going to put everything to one side a minute, because you don't really need the chopping board anymore. We're not going to be chopping anything else. So as I said earlier, I've got a little paper towel underneath, so we can use that. We can just mop up everything, clean up a little bit, and leave to one side. So we're going to use our basil now. So the basil's all been washed. Now we've got a plant. Okay, if you haven't got basil, you can use parsley, which is probably the best thing to use. You could use dried basil or dried parsley as well. All we're going to do with the plant is we're just going to take the leaves off with our fingers. Just clip them off. We don't really want to use scissors. We can just tear them off, it's fine. So for this, we don't obviously need a portion or anything. You're just using enough basil just to flavour it. You're just trying to look for some of the nice leaves. If you wanted to sort of take off, if you've got, let's say, for example, some of these basil bits here with the stalks you can chop up, and you can again put them in casseroles and stuff like that. Now, as I said, we're not going to chop this, so we're just going to rip it up and put it into our bowl, our mixture. Now, you can see there's a nice bit of green in there now. And what we want to try and do is save maybe 2 bits. And we're going to use those for a little bit of decoration after. Now, the next thing to do is just to plate up. So we've got our 2 bits of bread for 1 portion. And all we're going to do is spoon our mixture, doesn't matter if a little bit comes off, onto the bread. Try and get an even amount of sort of basil and tomato on there. Again, if you don't have to use it all, if you've got a little bit left over, you can always leave it in the fridge, save it for another day. But we haven't had lunch yet, so we're going to use it all. Get a nice little bit. And then, as I said about decoration, we've got 2 bits of basil. Before we've done that, we could have put a bit of salt on there, maybe some chili flakes. We could use a bit of olive oil. That extra virgin olive oil is really good, nice to go with it. If you wanted to, you could always use capers, if you've had capers, olives, black or green olives are fine. So it's a bit of a base recipe for you to do whatever you want with it. So we like it like this. I would personally put some olives in there just to give it a little bit something different. And then we've got our bruschetta. So the next thing for you guys to do is to sort of eat up. So thanks for watching this bruschetta cook along. If you've got any questions, you can email us them over. But as I said before, on the last cook along, these sessions are funded by the Co-op. So if you are a Co-op member who lives sort of around Bexley, Greenwich Way, you can sign up with your membership and you can back us as a cause, and that some of that money would obviously come to us to pay for these sessions. If you've been watching, you've been making this at home, if you've obviously had any changes that you've made, you might have put parsley on it, or you might have had maybe an onion instead of spring onion, send them over. We'd love to see what you've done, just to see how different people adapt the recipes. But other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.